Parshas Vayetze, Perek Chof Ches Posuk Yud Aleph. So the Torah tells us he came to that location. He took of the stones of the location, and he put them Yosef Mirashosov. It doesn't say Tachas Mirashosov. He put it under his head. So Rashi says he encircled his head with these stones to protect his head from not to be attacked by a predator animal. And the Torah tells us initially there were many stones, and when he woke, he took the one stone. The many stones were fused together to become one stone. So Rashi cites the Chazal. What were they? The stones were fighting. What do you mean they were fighting? Many years ago, Ernie is too young to remember, but in the 50s, they used to have cartoons, and you'd have like stones fighting, talking to one another. Those were the old-time cartoons. Where did they get all these concepts? I don't know who exactly were the artists who put this together, or the concepts, but it's Chazal. The Ramchal writes that everything in the physical is a mirror image of the spiritual. We spoke about the different worlds, the spiritual worlds, and they all evolve and manifest themselves in the physical. So the physical world is only a manifestation of what? A mirror image of the spiritual world. Everything in existence has a power source. There's an energy that allows it to be. All the energy sources, the value is what? Is only to accommodate the will of Hashem. The world was created for the tzaddik. What's considered miracle for the tzaddik, for the world, is considered the norm for the tzaddik. Therefore, we say tzaddik goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim. The tzaddik decrees, and Hashem fulfills the will of the tzaddik. Because ultimately, the tzaddik interest is what God wants. Therefore, nature is what is bound to the will of the tzaddik. So when the tzaddik decrees, like the Gemara talks many times, that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, when he said to the river, split, and he says, if you don't split, I will decree that this water should never flow on this location, the river split immediately. And many miracles were Hanina ben Dosa, because he was at that level that kol olam kula nizam mishul Hanina b'di, as the Gemara tells us, there's a baskol that comes out from Sinai every day and says the whole world is sustained in the merit of Hanina ben Dosa. Shedai b'kav charuvim me'erev Shabbos and erev Shabbos, which is sufficient for him, this literally paltry amount of carob, and it's dailo, it's sufficient. The world is sustained in his merit. So that is, but how's it possible? Because his Avos Hashem was such at a level that the world was created for a person like that. Therefore, all nature was bound to his will. The stones, Yaakov Avinu is the what? Is the, in the words of the Chazal, Bechir Shebavos. He was the chosen of all three patriarchs. He was the most special. He fathered the 12 tribes. He, as we mentioned in Medrash, he redeemed Avram from the kiln, because he's going to counter all the evil in the world, what he represents. So therefore, as a result of that, each stone wanted to be associated with him, because ultimately their value is only that person. So this is the quarreling, the fighting among the stones. Each one says, I want to be the one to accommodate the tzaddik. So what does Hashem do? He causes every one of the stones, because the malochim, meaning the energies that are behind those stones, understand that value is only the tzaddik, and they all have the same so-called objective to accommodate the tzaddik. He fused them all into one to what? To accommodate that tzaddik. And what does the measure say? How many stones did he take? He took 12 stones. What was the question? Yaakov didn't know quite if he achieved the level of perfection within himself that he was going to father the 12 tribes. The Gemara tells us at the end of Shabbos that each one of the patriarchs had a degree of impurity in himself. How did the impurity of Avram manifest itself? That was Ishmael. How did the impurity of Yitzchak manifest itself? That was Esav. Yaakov was mitosu shlema. All the children were tzaddikim, and David HaMelech, in Tehillim refers to them as shiftei koch. the tribes of Hashem. So Yaakov didn't know if he achieved that level of purity within himself to be worthy to father the 12 tribes. He didn't know if he had expunged all that impurity within himself to be able to establish those 12 tribes. When all the 12, so he took 12 stones, and if they would be fused into one, then he knew he was the Av, because although every tribe has its own unique personality and objective, but in terms of the whole, each one complements the other. So when the 12 stones were fused into one, when he woke up, as it says, Vayisa Raglov, the Medrash says, he walked on air. He knew that he was guaranteed where he's going, he's going to achieve what he's supposed to achieve. That in Choron, when he marries his wives, then there, whoever they will be, he will father the 12 tribes, which ultimately will approach Sinai and meet the objective of existence. That's the Medrash. So that's the 12 being fused into one. He slept in that location. So the inference is, it's Gemara Megillah, but the 14 years he was in, he studied in Aver, he studied from the son of Shem, he did not sleep. Meaning he studied, did not lie down, and he would just drift off, would not lie down. That was his level of immersion in Torah. So I pointed out yesterday, it's Al Yudal Shonim Sheshimesh Bebeis Sever. Doesn't say Shalomad. Doesn't say the 14 years he studied, he learned in Beis Sever. Shimesh. What's the expression Shimesh? The Gemara tells us in Brachos in the first parak that Godlo Shimushan Yosim Ilumudan. Greater is to be involved in a reality relationship with a Rebbe than just studying abstract knowledge from him. And the more quotes a posuk when it speaks about Elisha was the primary student of Eliyahu Novi. So the Gemara says, and where do we see he was a student? The Gemara quotes a posuk that Elisha would wash Eliyahu's hands. When Eliyahu would want his hands to be ritualized, he would wash his hands. Wanted to say all his understanding of prophecy, of how to be the prophet, doesn't say that, what he studied from him. It speaks about something very simple, the mundane. He washed his hands. So the Gemara says, here we see that God lo shimush yosin limudam. Greater is accommodating that great person than even studying the words. Meaning the impact is the person, is the interrelationship with the person himself who represents all that Torah. That's the shimush. Shimush is the accommodation. You know, it's interesting. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was the greatest, was the redactor of the oral law. He was the prince, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, and he was a student of Reb Meir Balanes. And the Gemara says in Eruvin, which we studied at one time, that Rabbi Yehuda Nossi says, why was I able to advance to a greater degree than my colleagues in Torah? Because when I studied from Reb Meir, you know, they had 18 rows of students. He says, when I studied from Reb Meir, I saw the back of his head. Yeah. When they would study the way he saw the back of Reb Meir's head. That's why I'm greater than my colleagues, my peers. But if I would have seen his face, I would have even been greater. Yeah. I saw Reb Meir Me'achorov from behind. If I would have seen his face, I'd even be greater. I mean, when we speak about a Rebbe Talmud relationship, you saw the back of his head, you saw his face. But that's what the Gemara says. If I would have seen his face, I would have even been greater. What does that mean? When you see a person, what does it represent? The person himself is an embodiment of the totality of what he is. Reb Meir was from the greatest students of Rabbi Akiva. And he's called Reb Meir that he illuminated the eyes of the Chachomim in Halacha. That's what he was. It's not only the words, the information, the knowledge he culled from him, which he was taught. Seeing that embodiment, that itself, that's the impact. That's go to shimush. Seeing that the end result and analyzing, seeing what that person represents, what he developed to be, that itself has a major imprint. The Gemara tells us in at the end of Brachos that when a person does his bodily functions, you have to do it with certain degree of modesty, even though you're by yourself in that location, but you have to do it with modesty. So Rebbe Kiva was learning from his Rebbe, and his Rebbe goes to do his bodily functions. Rebbe Kiva follows him into the location. So the Rebbe says to Rebbe Akiva, excuse me, could I have a little privacy? So he says to his Rebbe, Torahi, v'tzorchani lilmod. It's Torah, and I have to learn exactly how to behave, how to conduct myself at this moment. Therefore, I have to come in and be there when you do your bodily functions, to see how you behave in this modest setting, in this modest manner, when you do your bodily functions. The Rebbe said, okay, you're welcome to come in. Fast forward, Rebbe Kiva is the Rebbe, and one of his Talmidim, hear this? Accompany Rebbe Kiva into the same situation. So Rebbe Kiva says to his Talmud, excuse me, could I please have some privacy? The Talmud says the exact same words. Torah it's Torah, I have to learn it. What, you mean he can't explain it to him? Exactly how? Seeing it in real, in this, that person, the imprint, the impact, it's a different reality. That's what we call shimush. Shimush is being involved directly in real time, interacting and seeing that person, how he behaves. Yaakov was shimesh b'veisever, Yudal L'Shonim. This is a lomad. Lomad indicates something more abstract. Shimesh is more real. Okay? Last week's parsha, we discussed the digging of the wells, right? Yitzchak dug wells. First, it says when he was driven from the community of Gror by Avimelech, the Philistine king, it said he redug the wells of his father. Then he dug 3 new wells. Who were the 3? What were the 3 wells? Each one there was a quarrel on the first 2. The first one was called Asek. The second one was called Sitno. Sitno means hate. And the third was called Rechovos. That was the third well. So Ramban asks, what are we talking about? What's the value of knowing he dug wells and what they were called? It's totally irrelevant. So he says, the Ramban, that what is Be'er Mayim Chayim? We speak about the living wellspring. In Mekor Mayim Chayim, the source of all life, water, that's the Beis HaMikdash. Like Torah is called a Be'er Mayim Chayim. It's a living wellspring in the spiritual sense. The Beis HaMikdash being the location of the Shechina, the divine presence, that is the ultimate Be'er Mayim Chayim. We speak about Ma'aseh Ovasim Labanim, that when the patriarchs did certain actions, they created a dynamic which ultimately manifested itself in reality in the future. For instance, the Chazal tell us when Avram went to Egypt, and then when he left Egypt, he left with great wealth. That was to set the dynamic that ultimately Klausha will go to Egypt. And when they leave Egypt after a certain period of time, they're going to leave with great wealth. That's Ma'aseh Ovasim Labanim. Their actions, their behavior indicates and foretells the future. Identically, Yitzchak digging the wells, he's creating the dynamic that ultimately, which will bring about the end result, the Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, which will both be destroyed, and ultimately the Bayis Shlishi, the third, which is coming in Mashiach, and that will remain on a permanent level in existence. That's why it's called Rechovos. Hashem broadened it. It was without quarrel. That's the Ramban. So I asked the question. It says by Avram, why was there a famine? Avram spends 3 months in Canaan after Lech Lecho. All of a sudden, he's struck with a famine. And he realizes he has to leave. Why did Hashem bring a famine? To test him whether he's going to question Hashem. Here you tell me to leave, and it's going to be outstandingly great, and all of a sudden, I'm confronted with a famine. So Hashem was testing Avram. Didn't question Hashem. He left Canaan, went to Egypt. Okay? Yitzchak understood that what was the purpose of his father going to Egypt? Why Egypt per se? Because that's Masov in the body. Now Yitzchak, why was Yitzchak confronted with famine? Right? He's there. He's ready to go to Egypt. Why is he going to Egypt? So Rashi says, because as his father went to Egypt when there was a famine, he's going to Egypt. But when his father went to Egypt, why did he go to Egypt? Right? To create set the dynamic, ultimately which will bring about we should go to Egypt and leave Egypt with great wealth. So Yitzchak was going to go to why? Because he felt maybe the reason why Hashem is confronting him with this famine, which you can't coexist with the famine, is that he's part of setting that dynamic. He's also part of this Ma'aseh Avos Lebanim. Hashem says, Yitzchak, because you're that unblemished offering, you can't leave Eretz Yisrael. Go remain in the land, it'll be good. Okay. So now we have a question. So why was there a famine? Why was there a famine? If it's not for Ma'aseh Avos Lebanim, what was the value of the famine? So he'd say, it says that he planted that year, although the location wasn't the ultimate of Eretz Yisrael, and although it was a famine year, he had 100-fold yield. Maybe that was the purpose, to bring about a ness. Okay, maybe. That Yitzchak representing God, Hashem brought a miracle, which is unheard of, that kind of miracle. But what happened? It says he became very wealthy. He became wealthy to the point that it was an embarrassment to the king. So Avimelech says to Yitzchak, could you please leave our community? And he drove him out of the community with all his wealth. And as a result of that, he dug the wells. So what was the value of staying there and becoming wealthy? It was to dig the wells to ultimately to set the dynamic of Ma'aseh Avos Lebanim for the Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, Bayis Shlishi. That was the value. Okay? Now, why was Yitzchak chosen to set that dynamic? Avraham Avinu is the founding father of Klal Yisrael. He sets that dynamic. We go to Egypt, and we went to Egypt because he had spoken out of turn, and the wealth, okay, but what is Yitzchak? Why is Yitzchak? If Yaakov is the Bechir Sheba'avos, is the ultimate of the patriarchs, he fathered the 12 tribes, don't you think he should have set the dynamic of Ma'aseh Avos Lebanim for Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni, Bayis Shlishi? Why was Yitzchak chosen? That question bothered me. So Alan's mentioning a Gemara. He probably heard from Yitzi, his son-in-law. Alan.
Yeah, I'm here.
That Gemara you're mentioning, where did you hear it?
Yeah, I heard from Yitzi.
Okay, good. You got to quote the source, we want the Gula quickly. Okay. So the Gemara says over there on Ayin Testament base in Shabbos, quotes a pasuk that ultimately, at the end of time, who's going to come to the defense of Klal Yisrael? Yitzchak. And only because Yitzchak is going to silence the prosecution, therefore, we're going to come and reach that state of the Gula and the Bayis Shlishi. What's the discussion? Hashem goes to Avraham and says, what do you think about the Jews? They've sinned. So he says, something? Destroy them. Goes to Yaakov also. They're not worthy. Yaakov couldn't respond. Yitzchak says, something? What I've been through in my life, the way I've suffered, I was the older Tamim. I gave my life for you. And there's an S. Therefore,
I'll take care.
And then he makes a whole calculation. How many hours a day are we awake? We sleep a good part of our life. And this and that, and up to a certain age, we're not really culpable because we're minors. So altogether, how many years are we talking about? Hashem, so Yitzchak says to Hashem, you take 50% of the debt, I'll take 50% of the debt. And if you can't take 50%, I'll take the whole debt. And Hashem says, something, you got a deal. So ultimately, Yitzchak is going to be the defense for Klal Yisrael that we should merit the coming of Mashiach. That the Gula should come and we should have the Beis HaMikdash. The Baal HaTurim brings out in last week's Parsha, you have to have that keen observation. Whenever Hashem appeared to Avraham, it says, Hashem Elokei Avraham. Hashem Elokei. To Yaakov, it's Hashem Elokei. By Yitzchak, just as Elokei. This is a Yud Kei Vav Kei, Elokei. To Yitzchak, he says, I am Elokei Avraham Avicha. To Yaakov, Ani Hashem Elokei Avicha. Why by Yitzchak it doesn't say Yud Kei Vav Kei? So the Balaturim says, you look at next week's Parsha, Yudke Vavke represents Rachmin. Yitzchak lived a life of what? Of din. Never had Rachmin in his life. And he suffered because of this, because the evaluation was always exacting and precise. So Yitzchak is din. So Yitzchak suffered. His suffering was one on behalf of Klal Yisrael. He says, I paid the price. Therefore, if it's a question of assuming debt, I take the responsibility. I am the atonement. And that quells the prosecution. And as a result of that, we have the Mashiach. That's the Gemara Alan's referring to. Yachlom. Now he has a dream. This dream is what? It's a prophecy. Vihine. And the Or Chaim Kosh points out when it says Vihine, Hine means behold. It was a level of clarity and vividness, nothing comparable to this, which indicates it's a prophecy. But we know it's a prophecy because he saw angels ascending and descending. Vihine Sulam Mutzav Arzo, V'roshim Agia Shemaimo. There was a ladder which was strongly secure on the ground, and the top extended it to heaven. And angels of Elokim were ascending and descending. Malchi Elokim. Why does it say Vine Malochim? Why is Malach Elokim? Because we find the word Malochim could also mean agents, right? Vayishlach Yaakov Malochim. He sent angels. Malochim could also mean somebody representing Hashem, which is immortal. These are Malchi Elokim. He saw angels ascending, descending. Now the question is, why are they called Malachi Hashem? Why is Elokim? Elokim is Midas Adin, right? It's the attribute of justice. We'll see in a moment. These angels represent the 4 exiles that ultimately we're going to experience: Bavel, Parsa Modai, Yavon, and Edom. These are the angels ascending and descending. And the Medrash tells us that the ladder had so many rungs, and as many rungs as they ascended and then descended was an indication how many years that exile was going to be. The angel which represents the archangel of Bavel, the angel ascended 70 rungs, because Golus Bavel was 70 years, descended. Then there's Poras, Persian, and the Medes, so many. Then there was Yavon, the Greeks, and then there was Edom. Edom, the angel ascended, did not come down. And Yaakov, we'll see in a moment, was terrified. Seems to, and look at the exile of Edom. We're still experiencing it. It's the longest exile. We haven't yet been redeemed from it. So Hashem says to Yaakov, when he was terrified, he says, if he doesn't come down, which he doesn't want to come down, I will take him down. If I have to take him down, I will take him down if he doesn't come down himself. That's Edom. That's the last one, which we'll discuss. Olim v'yordim, angels are in heaven. It should say they descend and ascend. But here it says the opposite. They ascend and descend. Olim tchilov achakach yordim. Malochim shligo ba'oretz. The Malochim which accompanied him in Eretz Yisrael, ein yotzim chutz loretz. Those angels don't go beyond the border of Eretz Yisrael. V'olu l'rakia, they ascended. V'yordu malache chutz loretz lavoso. Other angels descended to escort him outside when he was going to Choron. It was a different group of angels. Okay, Rashi is just explaining, because remember we spoke about Machdayim. When he came to a certain point, he saw 2 groups of angels. When he returned, the angels that accompanied him, and he saw the new angels welcoming him when he came back to Eretz Yisrael after being away all those years. Now we had mentioned that when Hashem speaks to Yaakov, it's not only Elokei of Avram Avicha, it's here. V'hinei Hashem nitzav olov. Hashem is standing on top of the ladder. V'yomar, Ani Hashem Elokei Avram Avicha. You see Yud Kei Vav Kei. He points this out to Balaturm last week's parsha. I am Hashem Elokei Avram. The land that you're lying on, I will give to you and to your progeny. Now, there's a point over here, and there's a medrash that speaks about it. We find that Hashem does not associate his name with a person only after he dies. And yet, at this point, Yitzchak is still alive. Yitzchak was alive when he returned after 36 years. And when he appears to him at Har Moriah, he says, Ani Hashem Elokei Avram Avicha ve'Elokei Yitzchak. So Hashem is already associating his name with Yitzchak, although Yitzchak is still alive. Let's take a look at Rashi. Nitzav Olav L'Shomro ve'Elokei Yitzchak Alpi Shlo Motzinu B'Mikro Sheyichad HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shmo HaTzadikim B'Chayeiim. Although we don't find Hashem associates his name with tzaddikim as long as they're alive. Elokei Ploni Mishum Shnei Heim B'Kedosh V'Lo Yamid, because even the holiest, Hashem does not have any faith, because at the last moment, Chas v'Sholom, a person has Bechira, so he could choose to reject it. Kan Yichad Shmuel Yitzchak, but over here he does. Why? Fishako Eidov, because his eyesight had failed. The Kolu B'Bayis, it's one position in the Medrash, and he was actually confined to the house. Varehu Kames, therefore he was not, regarding desires, he was not functional. The Yetzer Hara posek bimenu, and he was no longer subject to the Yetzer Hara. As a result of that, the whole concept of Bechira, that there's a chance he may turn, not possible. Therefore, Hashem is associating his name with Yitzchak, although physically he's alive.
Because he was blind?
No, he says more. A number of things. Blind, he was confined to the house, and as a result of that, this combination, he was not exposed to anything outside of the confines of his house. The Yetzer Hara had no relevance to him any longer. Therefore, there's no chance he would turn. And this is one of the positions in the Medrash Tanchuma, the two opinions.
But he's still the Av, right? Until Yaakov gets married.
It has nothing to do with it. Av only means the Shekhinah is with him.
I see.
The Shekhinah is with him.
But his mission essentially is done.
No.
After he gave the bracha to Yaakov.
No. Until Yaakov got married, he was not enough. Yaakov, until he had his wives, was not enough.
I see. So I'm saying, so he's still an Av.
He's still enough. Av means he is the primary location of the Shekhinah.
Right. Okay.
Okay. The other opinion the Medrash says something. Rashi cites one. He's going on a very much, Rashi's a commentator, a much more practical level. The other position is, we find that Yitzchak is referred to as Afro Shel Yitzchak Tzova Lefonov. After the Akedah, Yitzchak was seen in the eyes of Hashem like a pile of ash, because the Yitzchak was agreeable to be slaughtered. And Avram, when he brought the ram, all the intention that he would have had when he would have slaughtered Yitzchak, he infused into that ram. So Yitzchak is the equivalent of the pile of ash. So Yitzchak, although he was living, but he was no longer subject to the Yetzer Hara. Because he's what we call the Ola Tmima, the sacrificed burnt offering. That's the reason why he was no longer subject. Not as he says, because he was blind. Because his status was already, post facto, he was the carbon already. So he no longer existed as being subject to the influences of the Yetzer Hara for that reason. Balance. Hine sulam mitzvah arzo. Rosh Magier Shemav. Hine malchei Elokim olam briambo. Hereuch b'chalom handevua. Here, he showed him in the dream, which is prophecy. He called it nase boretz nasa lidei malochim. Hakol b'gzeres elyon aleim. Whatever takes place on the earthly level, everything happens through angels. Ki malchei Elokim asher sholach Hashem lesalich boretz. Lo yaseh kitan o gedolo achuv nishatziv al odon kol oretz. Every angel functions based on the directive of the master of the world. Leimel fonov hisalchul boretz v'ine yosheves b'shalvo o meleach cher v'dam. Whether the world will be in tranquility and peace, or there'll be sword and bloodshed. V'yotze aleim loshuv l'redis l'oretz lashes devora. Whatever the directive, the angels are carrying out the directive. Then they go ascend, they get their orders, and then they go back down. Hereu ki yisbarach nitzav ala sulam. Listen to this. Umafticho liYaakov avtocha gedola. God is giving Yaakov a great guarantee. Lodia shu lo yeh biyad hamalochim. It will no longer be subject. His predicament will not be determined by Malochim. Hashem will not give directives for him. Avol yechelek Hashem v'yeh imo tamid. Hear this? He will be part of God's portion, and God will always be with him. His function, his everything that happens to him, is not going to be Malochim influencing or causing his life to manifest itself the way it is. Before he left, what did he say? I am with you. I personally will watch over you. Not the Malochim will watch over you. I will watch over you. Ki maloso gedola misharat tzadikim. Hear this? The level of distinction of Yaakov in the spiritual realm was greater than all other tzadikim. Shenema b'hem. This is the famous posuk in Tehillim. And Yoshua Sisi Elyon, Ki Malocha Vitzav Aloch Lishmochem Chol Drachem. O Tzadikim, he commands the Malochim to watch over the Tzadikim. Yaakov, Malochim, you don't need Malochim to watch over you. I am always with you. So if I'm with you, you need no Shmira. Ushmarticha, I personally will be involved in your life, no Malochim. Okay, so what's all these Malochim here? That's out of respect. That's to escort him. Not that he doesn't need protection. It's not for the sake of protection. The groups of angels, it's like, there's a mitzvah by Achnosis Orchim, there's Achilo Shtia, there's Lavoya. To acknowledge the person's value, you escort the person out. When he leaves your house after you host him eating and drinking, you escort him to show value. The Malochim only to show value. It's not for the sake of protection. By other tzaddikim, it's Malochim Tzavaloch, Nishmorcha. The function of the Malach is to protect the person. Yaakov needed no protection because Hashem says, Ushmarticha, I will be personal protection because I'm always with you. Okay, we're going to have to see the halacha. It's late.